Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, this is Rachel Cooke with Brandon Hall Group. Welcome to our Excellence at Work podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about volatility and workforce speed to capability. And I'm excited to have with me today Scott Kinney, the CEO of NovoEd. Hi, Scott. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks very much, Rachel.
And it's a great day. A lot going on in our industry, as you see. Each day is interesting as we look at what's happening around the world, as we look at how fast technology is moving, and kind of where AI sits in with it all. We're going to be talking about that. And also, before we jump into our topic, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your background and your experience so that you can share with our listeners.
Sure. Happy to, Rachel. So, a lot of my career I'm looking back at now instead of forward to at this stage in my life. But I've always been kind of at this intersection between technology and, well, for the last 15 years, learning, but technology and the application of that to, in particular, individual learners, but also large organizations who are trying to transform themselves. And so I actually started out as a software developer long time ago in Boston. And along the way, did a stint after business school at the Boston Consulting Group, which is actually a NovoEd client as well, coincidentally, but really learned a lot about business strategy and business models, but also about how, especially larger organizations, how hard it is for them to transform themselves. And I think that kind of paved the way. I've always been kind of a sales-centric type of CEO. After I left consulting, I started leading first small software businesses, then bigger software businesses. Real focus on the go-to-market side of things. And then I got into adult learning. And first at Thomson Reuters, I was running a group of legal education businesses, B2B, B2C, a whole range of those. I absolutely loved it. And I have a background interest in education and learning, comes primarily from my mom, who just passed away last year, but she dedicated.
Sorry to hear that.
No, she had a long, fabulous life. And so I had a passion for learning and for education. And then I had the opportunity to be the president of Capella University for a number of years. And that was it for me. I knew I was going to dedicate the rest of my career to making learning work better, be more effective, impactful, affordable, and accessible. And so being associated with NovoEd, and I led the acquisition of NovoEd by Fidelity's private equity arm back in 2018 because it fit a set of criteria that were interesting from an investment perspective, could kind of see how ed tech was going to take off, which it absolutely has. But also, it's of strategic interest to a company like Fidelity, has 85,000 employees, having the ability to transform a large organization through shared experiences and learning, very important to Fidelity. So that came together in a nice way. And then we acquired NovoEd, I guess, 8 years ago now, almost 8 years ago. And then I've been running it since just before COVID. And that's been fascinating as well, because NovoEd has gone from a very Silicon Valley spin out of Stanford kind of company. And the woman who founded the company, Farnaz Ranagi, is still the chief technology officer, chief product officer, absolutely fascinating woman, technologist and learning. So NovoEd has been really a nice combination of those things. But now, because of COVID, we're hiring a ton of people in 2020, 21, 22. And like a lot of companies, we decided to do that to find the best people we could. So it used to be 23 of our 25 employees lived and worked in the Bay Area in our downtown San Francisco office. And now, out of our roughly 100 employees, maybe 15 of them are in the San Francisco area. The other 85 are in 27 different states and 8 different countries. And we really are a global and remote business. And we think of that as a strength. It's very different. You got to manage and lead that kind of a company differently. For me, I've got to reinvent a lot of ways that you lead a business like that. But it's been a ton of fun.
That's we were just talking about that, having dispersed people across the nation and across the world, and bringing them together, from a cultural perspective. And also, I find that you being part of investors that had acquired the NovoEd, and then also being able to run it and have still the line of sight to both needs, I believe, or I see from other organizations that have gone through acquisitions and investors, that it puts you at a better position because you can really understand what both sides needs. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So let me just talk a little bit about the investor perspective, because that is something that doesn't get talked about as much. Well, by me either, when we're working with our clients or we're pitching our platform to new prospects. But it is a really important ingredient of how the industry has evolved and grown over the last decade. Tech was kind of a bit of a backwater for investors for a long time. It was mostly investing in schools and skills academies, all very much in person, very analog. And it wasn't a good performing sector for investors. So there wasn't a ton of interest there. That changed a little bit when for-profit schools kind of came on the horizon, but still that was kind of a very specialty part. And what's happened in the last 10 years is that the technology has gotten so much better because of NovoEd and hundreds of other entrepreneurs and innovators who created really engaging learning content and learning models. And because this is now in a more scalable SaaS kind of environment, it's much more attractive to investors. And in fact, the amount that's been invested in ed tech globally, not just in the US, China, Europe, huge markets for this, it has grown by over 10 times what it was. Now, that was a big driver of growth in the industry, starting maybe 2015, 2016 really took off. And then even through COVID, because that created an urgency to have some alternative kinds of learning models, you can't just get people into a room together. And so if you didn't have the capability to do something, and Zoom plus PowerPoint doesn't really cut it, right? And so that was an intense period of investment as well. But then, like with all investment cycles, it totally went the other direction and it has dried up a lot. It's starting to come back now because of AI, and AI is changing the narrative there. But investors have gone from thinking of ed tech as a place to stay away from to a place to really engage with. And there are a number of ed tech specific investment teams and funds now, and you didn't see those 10, 15 years ago. So that's been a real change. And AI has reinvigorated interest in the sector, as it has in fintech and literally every software sector out there. But as a practitioner, serving the L&D leaders, which are our principal partners at these large companies, they've been kind of on the other side of that, because the investment led to hundreds and hundreds of startups with cool little technologies. But could those scale? Are they enterprise grade? Or is a large company like a Fidelity, for example, going to put important piece of software that does some pretty cool stuff into a mission critical workflow when it's a little company out of Silicon Valley of 20 or 25 people. And, there's a lot of risk associated with that. You're seeing a bit of there's been a consolidation. I actually think this will accelerate in the next few years, but where some of the bigger players like a Workday or Cornerstone have been acquiring a number of these smaller innovators as a way for them to try to keep current and have some of the cutting edge technology as well. So yeah, it's been a crazy time, and I think that will continue absolutely this year, next year. And it's exciting for L&D leaders, but it's also challenging. How do they keep track of all this? And they don't want to have 30 different software platforms that they're trying to get to talk to each other. And so what we and a lot of other companies are doing is trying to move out, solve more problems, and allow a company to have one provider doing a set of things that they used to need 4 or 5 to do. I do not think there will be one-stop shopping where a Workday or SAP or Microsoft, Oracle, or Cornerstone can do everything that is needed by these large companies. So there's a big role. I'm a big believer in uh, even venture-backed startups that are going to do everything to kind of break the rules and disrupt what's going on. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to scale that, and it's got to be able to work
Right.
within a large company's tech stack.
And that's what we're seeing with our research. And we've developed some progression models here. I'm looking at AI and how it impacts learning and talent in HR, and where organizations are kind of fitting within or fitting into the progression of how do they bring it into their environment, and what kind of metrics or results are they seeing? Looking at, and companies are not anywhere near level 4 where they're at the optimal level of progression, and it's going to take some time, and a lot of them are sitting within 1 and 2. And what we're finding, especially at large global organizations, just like when we saw years back when learning started to integrate with talent, and you have these integrated systems, it's not so easy to be able to optimize each level or each function at the same time. And now with generative AI, and AI is not new, but the way that it is being able to be leveraged and how the technology is evolving, it's evolving faster. But some of what we're seeing and predicting is that it's going to take longer to get from, maybe we went from here and it's going to slowly go here for a little bit, because I think companies really need to, and you probably are seeing this, and I would love your perspective. There's a lot of decisions and ethical um, decisions that need to be made in order for them to utilize it and make sure that that the information, or that what is being produced is accurate, and it is really going to meet the needs that they're looking to accomplish.
Abs-
I would love to understand or to hear from you what your thoughts are as far as how are we going to make decisions around AI and make sure that we're doing it in a way that's going to be safe and ethical.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have and I have a perspective on this. At the same time, I recognize that our perspective about timelines and what it's going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, it's going to continue to evolve because it is a pretty chaotic environment. And that's not bad. That's how a lot of change takes place. It means there will be winners and losers in how smart they are about what they adopt and what they don't, and how much risk they take and how cautious they are. So it's a really fascinating period of time. I think that one important hypothesis is that AI is not just a kind of one of these fads that comes and goes. And I think about that as both an investor and as an operator of a software company. The venture capital and private equity industries thrive on hype and disruption. So they hype something big every 3 to 5 years. And they need to do that to raise money, to raise expectations about long-term value of these companies, because that makes their portfolio more valuable. So there's a lot of incentives to build that hype. But only one of every 3 or 4 of those proved to be truly transformational. And, there've been a lot of articles about where does AI fit in all that. But I think the consensus, and my point of view as well, is that this really is a truly disruptive technology for investors, for entrepreneurs, for operators who are trying to figure out what to do about it all. And as large as the last truly disruptive one, which was kind of the mid to late 90s with the internet. And at the time, and I was running a software company back in the late 90s. And, we were thought of as being, and all of those .coms, as they call them, were cutting edge. Their valuation soared, and then most of those, the market hype fell away. But the transformed business models have sustained and changed our entire society. And pretty much everything we do now is through internet-based technologies, and it's just a part of daily life. AI is the same. And we're in that same period of time, which was the late 90s for the internet, today for AI, where there are companies that are worth billions of dollars that have barely any revenues yet. There's a lot of anxiety amongst, let's just take our market, L&D teams. And we tend to serve large organizations. They do, like you said, Rachel, they've got to be cautious and thoughtful. They might have a couple 100,000 employees. They don't want them to be using inaccurate information when they're talking to customers or partners. They don't want them to maybe verge into risky territory from a compliance standpoint. If you're in the healthcare or financial services industries, you have to be very careful. You're regulated. You can't make big, important mistakes. Well, at the same time, the benefits of AI for healthcare applications or financial services applications is huge, right? So it's an anxious time if you're in really almost any manager and above kind of role in those companies. So I do think it's truly transformational. The way that we are approaching it, and just a lot of the people listening to this are maybe learning professionals. You've been in learning your whole career. And at the end of the day, we're still talking about building skills and capabilities for people and teams and organizations. And AI does not replace that. It doesn't get rid of learning. And these large companies, their L&D team may need to look different, but and in fact, they need one in some ways more than ever, because you've got to build programs and use AI tools when appropriate, where appropriate, in ways that don't threaten their data or put their customers at risk. But AI is so good at retrieving facts. It's wrong some of the time, but it's really good at research. And so you can get questions answered that are an early part of the learning process. But being able to practice, being able to apply that in the workplace, get feedback from your colleagues and your manager, have all of that in the guise and in the structure of a learning program that's important to the company. Those things still have to happen. And so AI, the fact that everybody might have an AI HR coach or HR partner, that's great for certain kinds of things. But the fundamental need for people to develop capabilities and really be able to, and these are capabilities that the organization wants them to have, not that they're just going off on their own and asking ChatGPT about. And so, yeah, I think it's a critical time right now for providers and practitioners.
As you're talking about the market and the tools, right, and all of the resources that we have, and how it's still critical to have people that are going to be involved in helping shape the future. And and just kind of, I don't know, I just started thinking about, for some reason, my kitchen, and you have all these ingredients right in the cupboard for making any kind of recipe, whether it's baking or dinner. And I like cooking. I'm okay. When I have time, I could be better. But if you actually throw every ingredient into your pot, I don't know. I don't think it'd come out that great. But knowing what ingredients to mix and how to use them can create something very, very savory and delicious. And I think that's kind of how we need to think about AI and all the tools that are available to us. Being able to make decisions on which ones work together and in what environments and what kind of, you know, how are you going to ignite it for its fullest potential, will create something very special and really kind of help your workforce excel and help your teams collaborate. So how do we create this these experiences or these recipes to help our learning teams excel better?
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy, and I think the answer lies in when you think about large organizations, whether it's AI or the geopolitical situation in the world that affects their markets they can access or their cost structure because of tariffs, or if they have energy needs, what's going on with that. Very complex, interconnected world, lots of uncertainty. The uncertainty goes up and down, but it's causing all of these companies to think about, all right, for us existentially, what do we need to be more nimble, or we need to have an organization that when it comes to working with customers, we're more empathetic and we're building longer lasting relationships. And so first they've got to think about what are the capabilities that are the most important to them for the next few years. AI actually plays a role in helping with that. Because if you have a learning platform where a bunch of people are learning how to be better managers or their first time leaders, and what do they need to learn about that specific to their company, I think there will be a lot of generic tools out there and generic content that for smaller companies, that's great. Hey, we'll bring it in. That should work pretty well. But for bigger companies, it's got to work for them with their content, their unique value proposition, their differentiation in their marketplace. So I think the way that the learning professionals, learning leaders are going to create these experiences is with their content and then tools that are easy to use that can deploy at scale for 10,000 learners or 100,000 learners. Not and it's not just driven by the individual going to Chat GPT or Perplexity and asking them a question, right? That doesn't help the overall organization move in a whole, kind of unified direction, which is what the CEO and the C-suite, that's what they want, is like, okay, we gotta move this company over here. And so I think it compared to, say, L&D leaders from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they do need to be tech savvy. They do need to understand how different systems integrate with each other. And they need to retain the fundamentals and the basics of how do human adults learn, and not forgetting that, not letting AI be a crutch that, okay, well, that'll take care of a lot of the basic stuff, and all we have to worry about is executive team development or something. No, it's AI tools will not replace that process of learning, but they can absolutely assist it, and you can capture data and analyze that data in exciting new ways. So I think it is an anxious time for L&D professionals, and probably in talent development and other parts of HR as well. I do think that I tend to be an optimist. The future is bright, but managing that risk side of it, there are going to be some mistakes. It's okay if they're not fatal mistakes, but that's where having the right partners who can sort of contain and manage and limit and mitigate that risk is a good way to go. These big companies, they don't want to just allow their data to leak out into the world through some AI tool. But at the same time, I think the experiences that you or I might have as employees of a company, learning experiences, should be more exhilarating, more human if done right? Not just you with an avatar. That could be a component of that for a little piece of your learning voyage, but it's really with your colleagues and with your peers and with your manager, and ultimately that's going to be the result, not just being able to get a quick answer to a specific question.
And when it comes to mentoring and coaching, how does that help as far as building capability that AI can't necessarily do? Or where does AI fit in with this approach?
Yeah, I tend to think a little bit differently about coaching and mentoring. I think there are a lot of coaches out there, and the last decade that I mentioned, where there was all this investment in new technology-based tools in the learning space, lots of coaching companies where these coaches who used to have to travel to maybe they could do it over the phone or something over Zoom, but they had to do their own marketing. Now they're part of this network. It was really good for coaches, and it democratized coaching a little bit. But at the same time, AI will be able to help with a fair bit of that. I wouldn't say it replaces the need for any of that at all. But if you need hey, the kinds of thing you might ask a coach, hey, I'm about to terminate somebody for the first time in my life. Help me out. I need some help. AI can actually give you some pretty decent help on that. But mentoring is more internal to a company, typically guiding somebody through a career. And I think that also can be enabled by technology. We have a mentoring product in NovoEd. There are plenty of other mentoring companies out there. But again, you come back to, we're human beings. We operate typically within networks and teams of other human beings. And we want to get better at not just our skills, but also our technical skills, let's say. It's never been a better time to learn Python or Ruby on Rails or other technical skills. But how do I influence people more successfully? How do I convince my boss that this investment would be a good one? That's the kind of thing that, AI can assist with that. Absolutely. It's still very human-centric learning. And you want to solve that where it feels very personalized to the learner if you're a large company, but you can scale it across thousands or tens of thousands of people. So I think coaching and mentoring, the concepts and of those will continue to be important. But I think the AI disruption of the coaching side is going to be pretty significant. I'm not thinking here about executive coaches who you might pay $25,000 for a 6-month engagement with. That market is still going to exist, but more the coaching.com types of things that came out. I think AI can do a fair bit of that. And it just like everything in our workflow, personal lives, work lives, AI can enable certain kinds of things to work faster or more efficiently. But if that's the only way we're going to measure it against learning, it will fail. We got to still think about learning outcomes, meaning impact on the business and impact on the individual's career development and career success.
Absolutely. And also the longevity of some of these technologies and sustainability so that they can be a longer term investment and really aligned to the environment. So we're not making quick decisions because we're being embedded with so many different tools out there. At any given day, there's something either that's embedded in some of our chat tools and our Microsoft tools. I think it's really kind of understanding what ones are going to make the biggest impact, and perhaps NovoEd or as you mentioned, of um, your the variety of what you have, and finding a partner that's going to be that's going to support you along this journey is really important, and being able to have a good fit is critical, because there's going to be a lot of change. There's going to be some shifts in how we mature here and how we move ahead, and then there's probably going to be some setback in any kind of when there's disruption. So I think just being able to have great partners and being able to think about all of this in a way of how it's going to make our jobs better, but also what is the bigger picture, not just what you need in that moment. Because
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine in your role, Rachel, you see a lot of these kinds of things that I'm talking about as well, where HR teams, talent teams, L&D teams are, they're excited by the potential, but there's a lot to wrestle with there. And so it's, for people who can develop a vision of, I know what I'm trying to accomplish. I know who my learners are and where I'm trying to get them, and the mandate coming down from the C-suite. Now, do I have the right assemblage of tools and content, internal content, to create these experiences, create these fantastic learning experiences? And Yeah, that's what gets me excited and I think makes this a golden age for learning.
And you're going to see some of the companies that are more progressive that are going to lead the charge, and a lot of the ones that are just going to kind of sit by and watch, and it's going to work. So, and that's how we kind of we're seeing in the progression of our models here, and that's okay because some of the companies that are going to be able to see what the progressive companies are doing and learn from them. But with this age, I think some of the acceleration is going to be a little bit quicker than what we've seen in the past with a lot of learning. So that'll be interesting. And as we wrap up, Scott, what are some of the things that that's going on for you this year that we should be on the lookout for at NovoEd?
Yeah, I can wrap that up pretty quickly. March, April, May, busy time of year for
It's
this
just that we're
industry.
already gone.
Yeah, well, it's been busy
Yeah,
for
I
us,
know.
I'm sure as well. But I think a lot of people who might be watching or listening to this are going to be at ATD or at the ASU GSV conference or at Learning Technologies or one of many other gatherings. We're at a lot of those kinds of things. And one of the thing we're going to be talking about the most, and that I'm probably the most excited about in this world of taking AI capabilities and then blending them into an overall kind of problem solution and technology-based solution for learning leaders is around practice. And practice is always, I think, as somebody who's been in adult learning now for a couple of decades, and adult learning is different than adolescent learning. There's a reason pedagogy and andragogy are two different concepts. They overlap a bit, but adults learn differently. And having a safe place to practice has always been a critical component in a successful learning voyage. But finding that safe space in an analog world, not that easy. You had to maybe be not with your peers, or because if you're practicing with colleagues, there's some tension to that, right? There's some the performance pressure can be good, but it can be a little intimidating as well. And practice has always been a component of the NovoEd learning experience. And what AI does and why we're so jazzed up about it right now and building much stronger and some really innovative concepts into the NovoEd platform around practice is that AI can give immediate feedback on a certain set of things. Let's say, Rachel, you wanted to practice your presentation ability or your ability to give a sales pitch. And we've had that capability on NovoEd since the beginning. But now, by blending AI and other parts of that experience with the individuals and the clients own the company, their own content, not external generic content, it really, in terms of performance improvement and actually being able to get from A to B in these soft skill areas, a chatbot is not going to help you do this, but AI can absolutely help enable that experience and the capture of the data so that can be used to help the individual and also feedback to managers and learning leaders. Super exciting area in L&D, perhaps the most interesting one right now. And so, yeah, if we see you at ATD or elsewhere, love to talk to you about that. And it's something we're going to be making a lot of product shipments and announcements about this year.
We're looking forward to learning more and seeing all the great stuff you have coming out. And thank you also for your partnership at our HCM Excellence Conference in February that just passed here. Seems like yesterday, but now it's
Yeah,
already.
team had a great time. They loved it.
And we're looking forward to next year and your support. Thank you again for joining me today, Scott. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. Take care.
Thanks, Rachel.